Good evening and welcome to Metro Focus. I'm Jack Ford. In moments, actor Tom Hanks will be here to discuss a program that is both near and dear to his heart and is helping America's bravest warriors. But first, as night settles on a busy day in Washington, the country tries to wrap its head around the 34th day of the government shutdown, with anger growing within certain of the federal ranks. Those affected about to not get their second paycheck since the shutdown began. Members of our military and FBI are expressing concern with a nation that they say becomes more vulnerable every day as the shutdown continues with no real end in sight. Some of those laid off, queuing up at their local food pantries, say they would rather have bread for their families than a border wall. And as a nation, we witnessed brinksmanship between the president and the Speaker of the House over the State of the Union, a fight ultimately won, at least for the time being, by the Speaker. On Capitol Hill, the president's former attorney and so-called fixer, Michael Cohen, after refusing to testify before Congress as scheduled, fearing, as his attorney Lanny Davis says, for the safety of his family after what he perceived as veiled threats by both the president and his attorney, Rudy Giuliani, has now been subpoenaed to testify before a Senate committee in mid-February. Looming in the background to all of this, special counsel Robert Mueller and his investigation into whether Russia colluded with Trump's 2016 campaign or individuals tied to the president. And while this all plays out, there's the court of public opinion to consider. President Trump's approval rating now stands at 34%, according to an Associated Press NORC Center poll. And according to a new CBS poll, 50% of Americans now think the Russia investigation is indeed justified, while 45% think it's politically motivated. So, what do we make of all that? Well, here with some insight into all of the above is well-known, respected investigative journalist and author Michael Isikoff, author most recently of the new book, Russian Roulette, the inside story of Putin's war on America and the election of Donald Trump. Michael, it's always good to see you.
Great to be here.
We haven't been together in a long time to talk, but now we have a lot of things to make up with here.
No shortage.
I want to start with your book, because I want to use the book as a backdrop for some of the other conversations we're going to have. And after looking through it, I always look to find reviews to see what people say about things. And I saw a great one that said about the book, exceptionally well researched, a scintillating read, but don't look for any heroes. Is that a fair characterization to start with?
I think it's probably fair. Look, myself and my co-author, David Corn, spent a lot, we were two of the journalists who were like out front on the Russia story during the 2016 election.
You guys were out front with the Steele dossier.
Reporting
you were there.
From our own respective publications. David writes for Mother Jones, I write for Yahoo. But we had some of the initial stories about Trump's connections to Russia and the allegations, quite serious, that were, ultimately we, as everybody has learned, were laid out in the Steele dossier. We continued to follow the story and began to piece together all the elements. And, what we discovered is that we had only come across the tip of the iceberg, and there was so much more to the story of both what the Russians did, how they interfered in our election, the many ways they did so, much of which was unknown to the American public.
Did you have suspicions about some of these, or were these revelations to you also?
Well, certainly the fact of the hacking of the DNC and this theft of documents and the providing of them to WikiLeaks and the theft of the Podesta emails, that was pretty much known. It wasn't accepted by everybody, most prominently the President of the United States, Donald Trump. But I don't think there was much doubt among the intelligence and law enforcement sources that we had that this was a fact, that this was real. But there were all these other dimensions to it, the social media campaign, the exploitation of Facebook and Twitter and Instagram by this troll farm was not something that was not only on our radar screen, it wasn't on the radar screen of the U.S. intelligence, it wasn't on the radar screen of the FBI. And that's really astonishing that there was this covert influence campaign going on exploiting American companies, social media platforms, and the American government is by and large oblivious to it.
As I said, it's a fascinating read.
It's a major intelligence failure.
Yeah, and that's what you come away with.
That we highlight. But we also
and you say to yourself, Why is it that we needed reporters to find this out that the government didn't know about?
Yeah. Well, look, I've been down this road before.
Right.
All the clues that were missed on 9/11. The botched intelligence on, in the run-up to the Iraq War. So, I think both David and I have a lot of experience reporting about intelligence failures by the U.S. government. But there's another element when you talk about the lack of heroes to this, because clearly the book focuses on Donald Trump. He has many connections to Russia, the many people in his campaign who had contacts with Russians. We learned about a lot more of them in the course of writing the book, but we also focus on the Obama White House. And, there are a lot of questions about how President Obama responded when the intelligence began coming in, and there were people on the White House staff who recognized the threat, who wanted to strike back in real time.
Right.
They get told to stand down.
In a couple of those instances, when I was reading them, your first reaction is, really? How could that have happened?
Yeah.
And I think it's important you mention that, because I want people to know, this is not a partisan look.
Not at all.
Because you're putting everybody under the microscope here. Right. And as I said before, no heroes coming out of this.
Absolutely not. And, we will see whether any heroes emerge as we all await the conclusions of Robert Mueller's investigation.
We can
but so
hope.
far, we haven't found any.
Yeah. Let me talk to you. Let me talk to you about some of that. Let me talk first about Michael Cohen.
Yeah.
All right. Were you surprised to see him back away and say, no, I'm not coming in to testify?
No, because his lawyer, Lanny Davis, had been hinting at that for a while. And, most significantly, Davis had also been making clear Michael Cohen wasn't going to answer the questions that we all wanted to hear in public.
It was not going to be the show that the Democrats would like it to be, and that a lot of people were fascinated.
I'm not even sure the Democrats were pressing as hard. The mere fact that they were prepared to accept Davis's conditions, which seemed to be the signals we were getting, was not a good sign. Right. That this was beginning to look more like a political stunt than a real investigative committee
they
hearing.
could have said, look, he's got his plea. The notion of whether he has a Fifth Amendment privilege anymore is a little bit more problematic. So, and now we've seen the Senate subpoena him. Does that surprise you that the Senate has said, okay, we're going to bring you in?
It doesn't surprise me that subpoenaed, but it doesn't go to what I think is the most important thing Congress has to do right now, which is public testimony by Cohen in front of the entire world, so we all finally get some answers to all these many questions about the president's relationship with Russia and that Trump Tower Moscow project. I mean, the Senate Intelligence Committee has held every one of its hearings for the past 2 years with fact witnesses behind closed doors, and we still haven't seen the testimony. And that is, in my view, a real deviation from historical norms and what Congress's responsibility is.
And if they're going to be the protectorate of the public, I don't care what side of the issue you come down on here. Let's find out what facts are so that we can drive our conversation. You go back to Churchill was one of the people I said, look, everybody's entitled to their own opinion, you're not entitled to your own facts.
Right.
So let's find out what those facts are, and then you can formulate your opinions.
The concern that has been raised by members of Congress is we don't want a repeat of Iran-Contra, where Oliver North and John Poindexter testified before Congress and then had their criminal convictions overturned. Right. But that doesn't apply here. Right. North and Poindexter testified under immunity.
Right.
And they were, nobody's talking about giving Michael Cohen
He's already pled.
immunity.
He's already knows what's going on.
His testimony is locked in. He spent 70 hours talking to Mueller in the Southern District in New York here. So, the analogy of Iran-Contra doesn't work. There's absolutely no reason that Michael Cohen shouldn't be testifying in public so we can finally get some answers at this
Let me ask
point.
you, switch gears to another subject here. As a longtime chronicler of Washington.
Yes.
What do you make of this head-butting battle between the president and the speaker disinviting the president to the State of the Union? People should realize the State of the Union, the Constitution says from time to time. It doesn't say it has to be on this Tuesday night in January. It's from time to time. But still, we've had these traditions.
Yeah.
What do you make of it?
I think the country could probably live without a State of the Union speech by Donald Trump. I think we'll survive. We'll be able to.
And there was a time when the president didn't come to the Congress and did it. Just did it on paper.
All those hundreds of thousands of federal workers who are not getting their paychecks.
Yeah.
That's what everybody should be focused on right now.
Yeah.
And, they all should be locked in a room and they can't go out until they come out with a deal that preserves the
whatever it is, some deal. Find out some deal.
Something so that the government can.
Last
go
question
on.
for you.
Yes.
Robert Mueller.
Yes.
What are you anticipating?
Look, it's been a black box, the Mueller investigation for some time. If you read the court filings, and I read every single one very closely, it seems to me that the bulk of his investigation is complete. There's one outstanding matter. That's the whether Roger Stone is going to be indicted. But whether he's got another big case to bring, it is not clear to me that he does. Now, he may have a lot of evidence against the president, and I expect he does. But as you know, Department of Justice policy is you can't indict the president. So this all leads
People
to.
need to realize
going to be,
he doesn't go and determine that. That goes to the Justice Department. And they make determinations what to do with his
Office
report.
of Legal Counsel opinion. So then the question is, what kind of report is he going to write, and whether we are going to see the full report? If you listen to Bill Barr's testimony during his confirmation hearing, it's not at all. Barr did not commit to a full public release of this report. It's not clear what kind of report Mueller is going to
whatever is
write.
appropriate.
Right.
We'll see
We're a
what that
lot of latitude there.
Yeah.
But, Congress, certainly the Democrats in the House will go after all the evidence they can that Robert Mueller has collected. How much of that will get turned over by the Barr Justice Department? There could be a legal battle over that.
Hey, Michael, it's always a pleasure. You're one of these people I always feel smarter after I have a chance to chat with you. And I got to say, Russian Roulette, the book, I don't care what side of the aisle you park yourself on, it's a book that you should read. And they'll find it, as the review said, scintillating reading, well-researched, but don't look for any heroes coming from it. Michael, good to see you. We'll get you back again real soon.
Anytime.